In this next section, we're going to look at factoring trinomials. So here are the steps with factoring trinomials. As you can see, the example problem at the top, ax squared plus bx plus c. So with factoring trinomials, we like to teach it as the AC method. But before you do anything with factoring, you always want to see, is there a GCF first? Is there anything in common with these numbers? If there's no GCF, then you move on to the first step. So you're going to multiply A times C. So the first number times the last number. Then you're going to look for factors that add up to the B. Then you're going to rewrite B using those two factors to kind of split the middle. So you'll have the 4 terms now. So instead of 3, we're writing 4. So then it becomes grouping on what we did in the last section. So group the first 2, group the second 2, take out the GCFs. The parentheses have to be in common, and then you can write your new parentheses. All right, so let's put it to practice. All right, so looking at factoring trinomials, our first problem. You are going to multiply the first and the last numbers. Remember that A and C. So there's invisible 1 in front of x squared times 22. So A times 1 times 22 is 22. Then you're going to write out all the factors of 22. So make your T-chart. So 1 times 22, 2 times 11, and then that's it. Now, when they multiply, it's to a positive 22. But when they add, we're looking for what adds to the middle number, negative 23. So when things are multiplied to make a positive, it's either 2 positives or 2 negatives. So you look at the middle sign to decide what signs you're going to use. Because they add to a negative, I know that both sides are going to be negative, right? Because 2 positives multiplied, 2 negatives multiplied make a positive. But when these numbers add together, they need to be negative 23. So now looking at our list, which ones make a negative 23? Well, it's negative 1 and negative 22. So that is going to be my new x's. So put an x behind them. So instead of negative 23, we are going to rewrite the middle number with our 2 new numbers. So x squared, just bring that down. Now I'm going to bring negative 1x, or just x, negative 22x, and then bring down that positive 22. So it's a 4 term, so that means grouping. Group your first 2 and then group the second 2. Take out the GCF of each group. So looking at my first group, what do they have in common? They have an x in common, smallest x, right? So that is my GCF. Open your parentheses. Now I'm going to divide x from my first group. You're taking 1x out. So if I take 1 away, how many do I have left? Subtract 2 minus 1. I have an x. So now if I take an x away, my x's disappeared. But what's actually in front of that? A negative 1. All right, bring down your middle sign. Before you take that GCF out of the second group, bring down the middle sign. What number do they have in common? Well, they both have 22. That is our GCF. So write your parentheses. Now we're going to divide 22 from both groups, both terms. 22 divided by 22 is just 1, so bring down your x. And then 22 divided by 22 is 1. Now, if you notice, I have a positive 1. Does that match? No, because when we took out the GCF right here, this 22 is actually not a positive 22, it's a negative 22. So you need to divide a negative 22. So negative 22 divided by negative 22 is positive x. And then 22 divided by negative 22 is negative 1. So when you get to that point and your signs do not match, you need to re-look at the second GCF. It is very common. This only happens when the middle sign is a negative. That will always happen when the middle sign is a negative. So watch out for that. All right, now that our signs and our parentheses match, bring one of them down. We only need one. So x minus 1. And now for our second parentheses, you are going to combine your outside GCFs. So what was our first GCF? The x. What is our second GCF? Negative 22. And then that's your final answer. All right, so let's try number 2. Try it again. Multiply the first and last. 1 times negative 36 is negative 36. So I need to write all my factors of negative 36. 1 times 36. 2 times 18. 3 times 12. 4 times 9, and 6 times 6. Okay, so they multiply to a negative 36. So that means one number is going to be negative. I need to decide, is it the smaller number or the larger number? So always look in the middle. Your middle sign is going to tell you what to do. So this middle sign always goes to the higher side. So that means my negative is going to be on the lower side. The middle sign always goes to the higher side. So my higher side is positive, my lower side is negative. So now let's find positive 5. From our list, which ones add up to positive 5? 9 minus 4 is positive 5. So that is going to be my new x. So put your x behind those numbers. So instead of positive 5, we are going to write our two new numbers. So x squared minus 4x plus 9x minus 36. Well, it's a 4 term, so I know it's grouping. So group the first two and group the second two. From our first group, what do they have in common? Well, they both have x, and that's the only thing they have in common. So divide x from the first group. So we're taking 1x away. So how many do we have left? 1x. 2 minus 1 is 1. And then our second group, those x's cancel, so bring down your negative 4. Bring down the positive sign. Now 9 and 36. What is the highest number that can go into both of those? Well, 9. 9 can go into 9, and 9 goes into 36. Do they both have x? No, so it's just 9. So I'm going to divide 9 from my second group. 9 divided by 9 is 1, so bring down your x. Negative 36 divided by 9 is negative 4. Do our parentheses match? Yes. So that means we're getting it right. So only bring 1 down. We only need 1 x minus 4, and then combine your outside GCFs for the second group. So what was my first GCF? An x. And then what was my second GCF? A positive 9. Now, if you you can check yourself with all of these problems. You can FOIL or distribute property back in, and it'll match our original problem. Or you can ask yourself, multiply the last two. So negative 4 times 9, That equals negative 36. And then add them. Negative 4 plus 9 is positive 5. So that means I got it right. All right, let's try a third one. All right, number 3. Do not get fooled because there's a Q. Just treat it like an X. Multiply the first and last. 1 times negative 40 is just negative 40. So write all your factors of 40. 1 times 40, 2 times 20. Can 3 go in? No. Can 4 go in? Yes. 4 times 10. Can 5? Yes. 5 times 8, 6, 7, and 8. Now, when they multiply to a negative, that means one of them is going to be negative. Look at the middle sign. The middle sign goes to the higher side. So that means this side is going to get the negative and the other side stays positive. So now we're looking for negative 3. Which ones add to negative 3? 5 and negative 8. Make sure you put your X because we are taking these two numbers and rewriting the middle. Or in this case, I'm sorry, put a Q. All right, so instead of negative 3Q, we're going to write our two new numbers. So rewrite our equation. So Q squared plus 5Q minus 8Q minus 40. Group them. Group the first two. Group the second two. My first group, what is one thing that they both have? They have a Q. That is going to be our GCF. So divide Q from the first two. 2 minus 1 is Q. Those Q's cancel out, so it's just positive 5. Bring down the middle sign. Now remember, the middle sign is a negative. It's a minus sign, so it's going to change our GCF. So 8 and 40, what is the highest number that can go into both? Well, 8 can go into 40, so that is my GCF. So open your parentheses, but instead of writing an 8, we are going to write a negative 8 under the second group. So negative 8 divided by negative 8 is positive 1. So bring down your Q. Negative 40 divided by negative 8 is positive 5. Do our parentheses match? Yes, awesome. So that means we got it right. So only bring one parenthesis down and then combine your outside GCFs. So what was our first GCF? A Q. And what was our second GCF? A negative 8. All right, so let's try number 4. Multiply the first and last. 1 times 15 is 15. List all your factors of 15. 1 times 15, 3 times 5. They multiply to a positive. So that is either going to be 2 positives or 2 negatives. Look in the center. What sign? It's a positive, so that means they're both going to be positives. Well, if you look at your list, does anything add to a 6? No, it cannot. This cannot be factored. It is already prime. You cannot do anything with this. You leave it alone. It cannot be factored. It is already prime. It cannot be simplified.